Fluctuating. Well, the only thing I can say is let's try this out. So far, it's doing good. Oh, internet, you better work properly. Don't mess up. Don't mess up. Stop to sneeze. Oh yeah, I was like, what am I doing standing there? I was about to. Okay. Horse is right there. Oh yeah, I was gonna talk to her. Let me pass. You there? Who are you? How dare you trespass upon Lady Impa's abode? Hmm? Is that Sheikah Slate? That when you are? No, it's not possible. Could it be? Could it be? I wonder.
Oh,
Up and please forgive us for being so rudely. So whatever. I can't read. Of course, we have heard the legend from Lady Impa herself. Please, friend, go ahead and step inside. Thank you. Move. Man! The fact she says I'm mad always makes me laugh. It's like she's so surprised there's a man. And then she gets like, could you be the hero my grandmother told me about? What was her name? Or what was his name? Oh, it's not that I forgot. I'm just bad with speech. As for me, my name is Pe- ooh, my name's Pep. I can't even say her name. Paya? Papaya. I'm gonna call her Papaya. I got it out. I know I should be able to say that easily, seeing as how it's my own name and all. And I'm so sorry. Anyways, my grandmother's been awaiting your turn ever since I was little. Please hurry inside. Impa. I'm here!
So, you're
So, you're
finally
finally awake.
awake. It
You're
has been
old.
quite a long time,
It has been
Link.
quite a long time, Link.
I am much older now.
I am
But
much older now.
you
But
remember
you
me,
remember me, don't you? No, you're just an old lady. What? He has amnesia.
Oh,
What is the matter? You are looking at me as though I am a stranger to you. Those eyes, they lack the light of Apparently, I'm feeling like that girl. Familiarity. It is I, courageous one, Impa. Surely you must at least remember the name Impa.
oh,
So you have lost your memory.
oh.
Well, it matters not. In fact, that may actually be a blessing in disguise for the time being. Dearest Link, please come a little closer. Now you're gonna tell me the story. I know it. Yep. 100 years ago.
Oh,
Yes, 100. The kingdom of Hyrule was destroyed. After you fell, Princess Zelda's final wish was to place you in a sacred slumber, and then all alone she went to face Ganon. Before Princess Zelda went to meet her fate, she entrusted me with some words she wishes to say to you. I have been waiting 100 years to deliver the princess's message. Geez,
oh.
you stayed alive for that long? However, what's the catch? These words, which the princess risks her life to leave you, will, if you are to hear them,
Oh,
you must be prepared to risk your life for risk your life as well. But I am afraid the burden may be too much to bear while you are still without your memories. I leave the choice to you. When you feel you are ready to receive the princess's message, return to me. Um, what? Wasn't I supposed to do something else? I talked to Impa. Oh, duh, yeah, I want to hear it. Talk to me, old woman.
yeah.
The words that the princess risked life to impart to you. I cannot pass them on to someone who lacks conviction as you prepare to risk your life for the greater good. Yeah, no duh. I woke up for a reason. No, I'm just kidding. With not a memory to your name, yet you are as intent as ever to change hard forward with only courage and justice. You have not changed a bit. Once a hero, always a hero. Thanks.
Oh,
Very well. Since you have lost your memory, I will recount for you all that has happened. And back to the story. I forgot how many times you have to freaking do it.
the history of the royal family of Hyrule is also the history of Calamity Ganon, a primal evil that has endured over the ages. This evil has been turned back time and time again by a warrior wielding the soul of a hero and a princess who carries the blood of the goddess.
Are you done with the other one, or are you still working on it?
With the passage of time, each conflict with Ganon faded into legend. So listen closely as I tell you of this legend that occurred 10,000 years ago. Hyrule was then blossoming as a highly advanced civilization.
Oh, okay.
Even the most powerful monsters posed little threat to the denizens of the realm. The people thought it wise to utilize their technological prowess to ensure the safety of the land should Calamity Ganon ever return. They constructed 4 mechanical wonders that came to be known as the Divine Beasts. They also built a legion of autonomous weapons called Guardians. The Divine Beasts were piloted by 4 individuals of exceptional skill from across the land. And
For once,
thus,
the
the
stupid thing
plan
is
to
doing good.
neutralize Ganon was forged. Upon Ganon's inevitable return to Hyrule, the princess and the hero fought alongside these 4 champions against this ancient evil. The Guardians were tasked with protecting the hero as the Divine Beasts unleashed a furious attack upon their terrible foe. And when the hero wielding the sword that seals the darkness delivered his final blow, the princess used her sacred power to seal away Calamity Ganon. Yeah.
100 years ago. Prepper. I'm bad. In preparation for the foretold reveal of Ganon, we strive to follow the lead of our ancestors of 10,000 years prior.
Oh.
But in the end, despite our best efforts and careful planning, we underestimated his power. In order to avoid ever making that grave mistake again, the princess left you there. That the princess left you these words:
Oh.
"Free the 4 divine beasts." That is what she wishes. Divine beasts. 4 divine beasts are the ancient Shiga weapons wielding. Thank you, Buttaboo. Uh, Weapons wielded by the 4 champions who Ganon defeats. Before the divine beast Va Rada. I still don't understand why some of these names are so complicated. How do you Ru Danara controlled the Daruk, controlled by Daruk of the Ganon. No, I didn't get a new gaming laptop. I found out it's part of my the internet, and I put too many video files on here. I am looking. Oh, you got one. Cool. Maybe you should start streaming too. Get a capture card as well. unless you can stream from your. I know the PlayStation has a streaming thingy on there, and you can choose where it goes. I think for the PlayStation, I got it on got it for the yeah. I wanted the 5, but it's expensive. But yeah, the PlayStation system, I don't know which one it started on, but I think the 4 definitely can stream. I use it to YouTube. Um, that's where most of my PlayStation YouTube ones are. If you go onto my YouTube account, I have previous gameplay from like Tears of the King or not Tears Tears of the Kingdom is Nintendo. Um, I have Kingdom Hearts, my playthrough with some of the Kingdom Hearts game, and my I think I got a couple Minecraft ones on there from the PlayStation, but my PlayStation was also being really funky at the time too. So yeah, I know the PlayStation has a built-in streaming thing. Nintendo doesn't, so I have to go through the capture thing. Uh, the Divine Beast Madu? How the hell do you? It's controlled by the Rivali Rivali of the Rito. The Divine Beast Ruta, controlled by Mifa of Zora. And the Divine Beast Va Nubris, controlled by Urbosa of Gerudo.
Oh,
It would be extremely ill advised to face Ganon without the power of the Divine Beast to help you. You must infiltrate the Divine Beast that were stolen away by Ganon 100 years ago, and bring them back to me. Bring them back to me. Bring them back to me. No, I'm just kidding. And bring them by your side. Bring them to me. I just said it, Mama. I can't read right now. I'm just reading so wrong right now. More information about these divine beasts can be found by locating the 4 races scattered across Hyrule. Bleep, bleep,
yeah.
bleep. The Sheikah Slate will guide you on your way. You can go where it tells you and meet with each leader there. Free the divine beasts! Free the beasts! It seems to me that your Sheikah Slate is not complete. The device Princess Zelda left you is your guide and also your memory. Now, let's see. Someone at the research lab in Hypno Village might be able to help. Hypno? Where's that?
Oh,
The location shining on the eastern edge is Hypno Village. This small village, one of the very few places involved suffering. Oh, that avoided suffering significant damage during the Great Calamity. You are you are Princess Zelda's only hope, and Hyrule as well. You cannot turn back now. Follow your heart and seize your destiny. Sure, I'm gonna wander the world. Okay. And why do you always do that? According to Impa, the sheep slate that. I know if I try to talk to her again, I can never remember what else you have to do after talk to her. She gives a long thing, so I don't remember. Sometimes I don't know if I have to talk to her again.
Oh,
Oh, no. Okay, we're done. Understood.
yeah.
Okay, bye. Yeah. Fate of Hyrule revolves around me. I am. If the fate of the world actually did revolve around my work, that would be horrible. Is the game sound too loud? Sab? Okay. So all the volumes are good? Tree branch. Why am I going this way without my horse?
Yeah!
Oh. This time she went, yeah. Come here, horse. Really are not gonna. Impa! Or not Impa. What's that one? Damn it, I forgot the name of that person. You got a capture card, Sab? I'd probably send you one of the ones that I got, because I just recently bought another one thinking I lost the other. I don't know, though, because I tend to lose stuff. Let's go, horse. Hey, Mom, I just now thought of it. With me streaming like this, you don't have to worry about a camera. I remember before when I did any type of streaming, it was always with a camera. I will deal with you later. I don't have enough Korok seeds. How's your day been? That's good. What you gonna do for your mom tomorrow? Dude, you knew I was coming. Why'd you scare? Ow. Look, another black horse. I'm gonna barbecue for Mom tomorrow. So it's the same time we're all doing D&D tomorrow too, so... Wait. Wrong way. just now realized what I was doing. I almost ran into her. Whoops. Well, at least you get to see me fall a couple times, eventually. Out of the way! One thing about this game. The length of stuff. Oh, let's go, horse. We're about to be attacked. You're a person that's a Zol. Dude, that doesn't... I am on a mission. Then I'll do so. Into the unknown. My ratings aren't good. Oh, shoot. Where's the... Oh, yeah, the tower's over here somewhere. Okay. Never mind. Like, crap, where's the tower for this? Let's just hope my horse survives. Oh, I can't. That's right there. Monsters here somewhere. Where are you? I didn't even equip anything. Well then. Where? I swear there was a bridge over here. I could whistle for you, so I'm just going to make sure there's no danger. There's you. Bye! Ah! Why does that happen just as I need to... You know what? Let's get rid of this thing. Haha! Give me your pitchfork! Oh, that wasn't his pitchfork. Oh, okay, bye. One, two, jump. There. Knew it. There's... Damn it. A mop. Really? I keep forgetting about that. I just need something to kill him. Pick this up. I'm gonna die quick. Maybe I'll leave that horse there. Ow. 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 I'm surprised this isn't broken yet. You just go fall in. He did too. You know what? That thing's not worth it. I am going up. Bye. Fine, let's swing this big thing. Well, it says there's 4 viewers. I want to hear or see if you guys got any plans for is something attacking me? Yes, something is attacking me. Okay. Oh! Shh! And of course I miss. Be gone! Now I have a flammable. You asshole! No! You have a torch! Give it here! Give it here! Ha! Okay. Switch to this thing. Bye! Blink, blink, blink. Guess good thing I didn't break that. Fire! And nope. I mean, that works. Dang it. I mean, I could toss it. You know, I think that's gonna be the dilemma. I am gonna toss it. Oh, apparently that didn't work. Wait, don't go out. It's... Oh, I just put it out. It's still here. Damn it. No. Dang it. I tried. I have fire arrows, but I don't want to use them. I think I have to now. Put up there. Oh, yep, no. I just realized I need to eat. Back. At least I got it. No, I didn't. God damn it. You rest up there, then go up. And I get up. Made him tired. Oops. Chica Slate. Oh, whoops. now I got the region. Okay. There's my horse. Now I'm not gonna go up there. If only I had more stamina. Where did I leave my horse again? Down there. And drop. Ah! Really? I got enough longsword stuff things. Woo. Oh. Hi, Blob. Bye, Blob. You're too slow. You stopped because of a rock. You jumped over the other ones. Out of the way! Run! Oh shoot, I didn't even look at Megan's other messages. Oops. I'm a traveler! Thank you. I don't want the inn though. How's everyone's evening? Walking through the town at night. I can't pick up speed yet till after I'm the hill. Oh, good thing I did. Good thing I did grab that torch thing from that monster. I just now realized I need a torch. And again, there's a torch up there. Doesn't matter. Burn! Oh, whoa, too far. I love doing this. Talk to her, then talk to him. Even though I know I talked to her. Director is in the back. A, a terribly busy person, that one. Please try to keep it. Okay.
Hi.
Good evening. I imagine you have never seen so many books in one place. Be incredible, isn't it? We've gathered all of the Hylian's knowledge, literal on ancient civilizations here. I cannot use big words. As for the as for the number of books, well, that is the thing on your wrist. Waist. Your wrist. I didn't know Luke had something on his wrist. Is that a Sheikah slate? There's no mistaking it. That's a real Sheikah slate, isn't it? I've never actually seen one in person. If you could just show me the runes on it, I'd be most appreciated. Rune bombs. So that is runes, but strange. Doesn't seem like you have the basic runes. I don't understand why they're missing. There must be something. Ah, where are my manners? I nearly forgot to introduce myself. My name is. Yeah. There's like two I's in there. How the fuck do you pronounce that? Oh, whatever. You are Link, right? Know my name? Lady Impa caught me up to speed. You see, we were told a young man holding a Sheikah slate will appear, and you will most do all you could to help him. He will be the hope that awakens from the slumber of restoration. His name will be Link. Oh dear, I forgot to tell you something very important. Director, listen, Miss Director, it is a real Sheikah slate. Oh, that's right. I haven't introduced you. Our director. And it's the one I just talked to. Happened to be right over there. As the Ancient Tech Lab director, Miss Parish is the world's foremost authority on ancient Hylian culture. You lied to me. No, just kidding. Check it. I have the utmost respect for Miss Parrish and all she's accomplished. I'm honored to be her assistant. On that note, Link. Yes, you see, the director may look like a young girl, but, well, maybe it's not my place to be telling you these things. You should talk to Miss Parrish herself. Okay, how do I get the rest of the slate, lady? Girl, whatever. Talk to me. Are you surprised the director of this laboratory is not whatever his name is? It's me. Snippy snap. Snippity snap? Is that how you say that? I can never understand that language. Anyway, Winky, do you remember any dreams from your time in the slumber of restoration? Yeah, you don't look like you're changed a bit in the last 100 years. Something must have happened in all of that time. I lost my memory! Well, no matter. I'm just happy you're still in one piece. With that, what's with that look? Do you still remember me, right? Um, do. You know what? I want to say I've never done this one. I'm doing this one. I remember. Even though I was the one who put you safely into the slumber, despite all that, you still don't remember me. As expected. Time to write notes down. After 100 years of slumber or frustration, the subject has lost all memories. Noted. I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a bad habit of taking notes rather than that. It's a charming quirk, isn't it? Anywho, do you have any questions for me? You're a child. Oh, very rude. Or perhaps it's not rude at all. I suppose it's actually a rather logical logic conclusion. Truth is, I look this way because a failed experiment. Well, I say failed, but in some ways it was we document the full affairs. So I insist you refrain from reading it. Anyways, enough about that. Back to the topic at hand. Here you are, after 100 years. No kidding. Here to defeat Calamity Ganon, who is growing in strength with every passing moment. Rescue our beloved Princess Zelda, that is, if you're going to. Got the courage. And to help with girl, I, the one and only Parish, will restore the basic function. And what do you say to that? Yes, please. Alright, then first I need you to run an errand. What's the look on your face? I don't think you'd fix your slate for free, did you? I did. What? Okay. Let me explain what this errand entitles. You know the furnace on the well just outside of this laboratory. Could you please bring the blue flame from the ancient furnace in town? Oh, and also use it to light our furnace. The sweet little guidance stone will start working once you do that. Allow us to restore your missing. I wonder if women little. I suppose. Oh my gosh. Um. Okay then. I'm counting on you for the blue flame. Okay. Now the flame. Maybe I should have done the flame before doing this. And it is down here. Paraglide to it. Was it down here? Oh, somewheres. Oh yeah, it has to be. There's the jump in the fence right there. I know my thing is broken. Get lit. Go around this way. Yeah, I can go around this way. Same. I'm in the Olympics. No, I'm just kidding. Set the tree on fire. Okay, this way. Up the mountain. Oh, no, that's by accident. It set it on fire. This is on fire. Teleport. Good morning. Thank you so much. How now that then take a look over there. Granite stone must be starting to react. There's nothing mysterious about it. This is per pure science. My sweet little granite stone. You sure know how to make this old researcher's heart flutter. What is it with these two old people with the damn freaking guidance stone things that they have? Well then, let's go ahead and restore the Sheikah Slate runes for you. Give it a quick, nice snap. Go on, no time to be shy about it. Snap! Okay, after this cut scene, I'm gonna pause for a bit. Well, Link's just gonna stand around. Camera. Starting repair. Oh, there's pictures. Repair complete. And it says so. Is all fixed up. Let's see. Which one is camera? Hyrule Compendium album. Yep, looks good. So, I know this is sudden, but hear me out. Take a picture of me with your camera. Oh, and don't forget to let me look. Do I have to? Snap! How's the picture going? Look! Calling herself beautiful. Yes, that's my cue. Sorry, I have lost it. There wasn't on purpose. It's no just girl in image. Yes, there are some odd landscape pictures stored in the album. I know Princess Zelda had made frequent use of the camera function, but this, Blinky, it dawns on me that you were Princess Zelda's appointed knight, which means there's a strong possibility that you accompanied her to all of these places where the pictures were taken. Oh right, the lost memory thing could prove troublesome. But don't lose hope. It just means those pictures could be the missing piece to help restore the lost memories. If I suggest checking Impa. Know more about Princess Zelda than ever even I do. Oh yeah, there's just one more thing you need to do. About I want you to back or to which. Oh, okie materials, boards. Okay. I'll stand outside. Watch it go night and day. Watch the scenery. Okay, I'm gonna eat real quick. So you guys are gonna watch it go night and day. I think Blood Moon. Whoops! I didn't want the camera. The Blood Moon just passed recently. I think I got it on the thing, so if it happens again. It happens again! It's so near me. Yeah. No, it's not. But my turn that. And turn that heater, air conditioning off. I was right. I did hear a ooh for a reason. Somewhere. Okay, now. There's a couple jams going on down that way. Between. No, that does look like a mummy. Yeah. Trying to think of the other one. No, it's not Suquamish. No. That has to be. Yeah, that is Lummy. That is Lummy. Now that he's going around looking, showing the camera. Oh, whoops. The force that go along the thing when we're at Paddle to Lummy. Just makes you think of when we're standing there or sitting there. Yeah. There was a gem in Lummy. I think there's one in Suquamish. No, not Suquamish. Oh, they're doing they're doing jam sessions. There's a bunch of jam sessions. Look on 360 where she's at. See if she's at a jam session. Oh, whoops, whoops. Doing this one-handed is horrible. Okay, there we go. Woohoo! Out of my way. Why are you going that way? There's nothing up there. Okay, there is, but Okay, it's making me go back to Impa. I was like, where the fuck is that little light going? Woohoo! There is a oh, the actual. Excuse me. Oh, forgot you don't like jumping in or running unless it's out of the villages. You're in the way, dude. Guys, ready to go? Am I going the right direction? Yes, I'm going the damn right direction. Almost lost myself. Oh, I should have got that shrine. Fuck. Oh well. I'll go back for it later. Kill the thing. God damn it. Oh, I don't have a... Oh well. I forgot the shrine at the gut. I just didn't realize I did this without getting the shrines. Out of the way! This lime's almost got me. Out of the way! Oh, wrong. Aha! Yaha! You found me! Bye-bye! I am surprised I got that while on a horse. Climb, Link! Climb! Nope, it won't let me. It won't let me! So let's get up here then. Oh, arrow. Arrow! Haha! I got both of them. Before I do anything with Impa, make it easier to teleport here. I'd skewer the chicken, but I don't want the other chickens to come at me. Okay, good. I don't like the strength ones. So annoying with battle. And yet I'm playing a battle game. Well, you think about it. I don't like the strength test things, but yeah, I'm playing a battling game. No, never mind. I spoke too soon. I think this is one of the earlier ones. So what can I drop for that? We could get another torch somewhere else. Yep, just as I thought. You know what? Since this one's almost broken, drop it. This is gonna teach me how to... Whoops, wrong. I don't know what I was doing. Okay. I think it's basic battle. Use a side hop to avoid enemy until you create... Oh. You kidding me? Jump. Instructional. I gotta wait for it to... Oh! I'm too far! Oops. Come on, time it. There we go. Fury! Die already. Ah, damn it. Nope, not yet. Oh! Wrong button. Now what? Oh, parry. I did a good one earlier. Yeah, press A. And... swing at me! Oh. Didn't press fast enough. Really? I think I'm too close. Why won't the A work? Whoops. Yeah, I think just... I gotta... maybe as he swings down? Nope. God damn it. Yes! I know what the fuck to do! Shut up! See? I can do it! I can do the parry! There! Bitch. Am I done training? Spin attack. Am I done? Thank you. I already knew all of that. One thing I hate about these things is redoing all that informational crap. Okay, since I got a better sword, let's drop this thing. Ouch! Oh, I moved my foot too fast. It still hurts. I don't know what's worse. The monks or the... What is going on? Is that Uncle? Oh, okay. So it's messages then. I need to change up your ringtones. They sound the same. Shing! I got 4. I can redo my. I can level up. I need another heart. Here, die. We're close to that. Okay, I haven't died yet. May the goddess smile upon you. As I always keep saying, she laugh upon my failure. I wish I could make the loading screen a little faster. I'm back. Oh, heard from her. She was giving you the runaround, but you seem to be just fine. Unlocked. Now then, let's see.
Oh,
This is without a doubt the camera that Princess Zelda used 100 years ago. Oh.
ah,
It would be that you. It would. Oh my god, I can't read. You know what? I'm gonna just keep going with the thing. Come back here once you have tried going to at least one of the locations. There is something I wish to give to you. Good, I need it. Door? Why do you close when I'm turning around? Automated doors, anyway. Okay. Give me hearts. In exchange for 4 hearts, I will amplify your being. Yes, give me hearts. Yes, give me the heart. I just now realized they put a freaking bib on this one. This goddess statue. Yeah, look. At least that's what it looks like. I don't know what they call them in Japan. There's some type of thing. They're for certain deities. Chicken, you're in the way. Okay, I can't really read off my TV. Are you sorry to bother you, but are you a fellow traveler? As for me, I just love art. In fact, I'm traveling to the world in search for beautiful landscapes. Between you and me, I heard there's a great fairy fountain somewhere near. I need $100 near this village. I hear the breathtakingly beautiful. Aesthetics aside, they also say the place can bestow people with some kind of mysterious power. I've been researching it for ages, and I finally have a lead. There's a place just beyond that is beyond suspicious. The problem is I cannot seem to find the fountain anywhere. Sigh. Nothing beats the thrill of tracking down a perfect view. As I'm tired. As a fellow traveler, you understand this. Yes. I just knew there was something. Sadly, I cannot pin down the exact location of the Great Fairy. I haven't put it all together yet, but there's a suspicious place that has all that. In fact, I was about to head there now. You would like to come along? Sure, sounds great. Great answer. Just what I expected from a fellow beauty connoisseur like you. All right then, follow me. Find the Great Fairy. Or like follow this dude. Why do you sound more out of breath than Link? Again, why do NPCs... I can redo Skyward Sword. Oh, the Joy-Con. You're gonna have to send a picture to me. I wanna see it. Jeez, who is revving? So tired. Hills aren't easy for old... What? Foggies? Is that what he's saying? Like me. Sorry, but I don't think I can go on. The Great Fairy Fountain should be along the path that leads past the shrine. That's what I've been told, anyway. Yeah. Yes? I'm completely out of breath. That's always happened right about here. I think I'd rather rest for a bit. You go on ahead. Go on without me! And hey, if you find it, don't forget to get a picture. Where's that? Get this picture too. Don't scare it, don't scare it. See me, damn it! Too late. Oh, and it has to be raining just as I'm gonna take this picture. Wait, do I have rupees? Do I have rupees? Where's my... Oh, okay. I have rupees. Wait, casino, what about it? It just says Point Casino? Google Map. Oh, not Google Mail. Google Map. What did I do with Google Map? No. Oh, Port Gamble. I didn't know Gamble had a casino there. Oh. I guess you could say every reservation has a casino. The only one that doesn't. You know what's so funny? The last meeting we had, they were actually asking about it, but sounds like they're trying not to. The tribe is trying not to go through the casino route for Koyuts. But at the same time, they know how much of a beneficial aspect casinos are. So they're trying to think of another way. That's why they're doing the tobacco thing. But even then, that's kind of like they're going through various stuff to get various tourism down here. Even though we have Twilight, I fucking hate that series. Not a good representation, but it gave us some kind of tourism. Not big tourism, but something. Why, fairy? You're so high. Get down here. Why is it always one fairy? I can't. Yes, got it. Okay, now I can go to the Great Fairy. Boy, sweet boy, please listen to my story. Sure. I am the Great Fairy Kotora? I'm gonna call her Kotora. This place was once a beautiful spring, but as time passed, fewer and fewer travelers arrived to offer me rupees. As a result, my power has abandoned me. I'm nearly powerless now, so I beg your help. I need rupees to become whole again. All I need is 100 rupees. Once my power has become restored, I can help you do great things, boy. Now, if you have rupees, hand them over to me quickly. In order for me to regain my powers, I need rupees. Here you go. Yoink. Good thing I had rupees. Thank you. You're too kind. Ah, the power. It's overflowing. Not enough time to run. Yeah, that's audio right there. I'm not even going to say that in. Oh, this is also the one where Ducky has a heart attack. Because that's where it ends, is right when he had a heart attack. Or was it the beginning? What a feeling. That first breath of fresh air after an entire eternity of decay. It's just so intoxicating. Thanks to you, I've been returned to my former glory. And as they say, one good turn deserves another. I can help you, boy. Allow me to enchant your clothes. Oh, that's TikTok. It's the least I can do, but I will need the necessary materials. I'm surprised his phone didn't get wet in that scene. I know. Then again, they tried to move him away from it. With the power available to me, I should be able to enchant your clothes a little bit. Enchant away! Oh, you enchant my pants. Oh, I do have enough stuff for all this stuff. All right. With what you want to enchant? Yes. All right. Let me do my thing. Ding. Oh, finished. Just a little stronger now. Oh, you've heard about set bonus, right? How a set of clothes that have all been enchanted twice could it have been bonus, but only if you wear the whole set. Well, and not all sets have a bonus. Do you have me? Yeah, let's enchant more. Okay, I'm not reading the rest of this. It's just gonna say the same thing over and over. Little Boston. Mm-hmm. Fort Gamble, Little Boston area. Lana? No. Oh, Nancy and them. Yeah, they were in what do you call it? Dang it, I already forgot. Is that all she was gonna do? Oh, yeah, apparently that's all she was doing. Okay. I didn't realize that. I could have read the rest of that. It got stuck to my phone. Okay, now to take a picture. Someday I hope I can see the place spoken of in whispers, veiled in mystery, the great fountain fairy. Oh, I found it. Oh, you found it. Really? Are you serious right now? And if you are, then where's the photo? You remember to bring the photo, right? Yeah, no duh. Here it is. Ta-da! This is the Great Fairy Fountain. It's certain currently beautiful, but I thought it would be more sacred and elegant. Well, how much elegant do you want? Well, I'm impressed you found it. What I want to give you something to show my appreciation, but I don't think I have anything on me. I know. Is there a place you've been seeking? I've traveled all over Hyrule, so I might be able to help you find it. Recognize anything? Hmm. A large gate with a snowy mountain beyond it. Oh, I know that place. There is a giant mountain east of this village. It's called Mount Lanaroo. Lanaroo. At the base of Mount Lanaroo, on the west side of Neg Nedro Snowfield lies the gate. That gate. I'm almost certain. I'm glad I knew how to that location. I suppose my help was useful then. Got another hour. Okay, bye. She just ended that call real quick. I know we've watched this one about a billion times. Is there anything else we can watch or have as background? Oh, that's. Whoa! No! Ah! Wrong way! I just realized what I was doing. I was jumping from the wrong area. I did not mean to do that. Oh my god. Okay, you're apparently not the only one. Maybe we should just start closing the curtains when we eat, because I am hungry. Woohoo. Woo. I need some of these. There's some around here. Jeez, you can still hear that audio from way the fuck over here. Woo. Need more fireflies. Come here, firefly. I'd zoom, but I'd scare you. You can't get away from me. Okay. How many do I have? Oh, okay, good. I think I only needed 10. And of course, I'm fighting those things. You know what? Let's do this thing. Ah! Yourself! Go! Holden! What the fuck just. I am so glad I got that on stream! Oh my god! I didn't know what the hell happened! Oh! Oh my god! I don't know if it hit the head That was amazing. I lost a quarter of a heart for that. Oh my god. Was it a quarter heart? No, never mind. Not a quarter. A full heart. Oops. I'm gonna have to watch that replay. Oh, wrong device. Don't tell Mom. How about telling me? Now I'm concerned. You know what? I'm a tattle. Mom, Sab hasn't eaten today. Distracted by what? Get in the. Get in there. Get in there. Get. Why? Usually this fits in the stupid thing. Well, I'm here for another hour. Go get something to eat. Mom said now. Why won't you? Ah! Okay, get in the fucking hole. Finally! As I climb the fucking wall. Yeah! You found me! Bye bye! I mean, seriously, I'm just gonna be running around smashing things now. Except for that memory thing. Break! Okay, that's not the thing I wanted broken, but okay. I mean, if I was that eager, I would have had the horse to do all of this stuff. Oh, I was like, what's all buzzy over there? Is your game. Don't talk to the person. Don't talk to the person unless I want to start a fight. I do not want to start a fight. I don't want them to see me. You can't see me! Yeah, then he's gonna fight me. Or she. Whatever it is. They. Their pronouns are they. No! They're bad guys. It will fight me. You know what? I'm gonna throw the boomerang. Michelle Obama. This must have been when Barack Obama was president. Freaking Michelle Obama. They can't find me. No, they're not. Game of hide and seek. Oh god, I got a bunch of arrows right now. He saw me! Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, I almost got you. Fuck. Thought I had him. Okay. Oh. Rubies! Finally! Dropping all these things. Never freaking... That's the one thing about Tears that I love, is that in Tears of the Kingdom, when there's rupees on the ground like that, you can fucking pick them up. Unlike this, you can't. See, look. I can't pick it up. I have to literally go over it. Oh! Wrong thing I wanted. Oh, and he said yes, he'll go eat. I don't know if he's actually doing it right now, but... might actually go get... what do you call it? For... Oh! I can't pick it up. I have to walk over it. You get food? Run away, arrows! Aw, damn it, it saw me. You want to do spears? Let's do spears. Give me your spear. Oh, I can't take it. You know what? I have your spear now. She's in shock, that's all. I don't know. They can. Fuck arrows. Oh, your minis? What? Still cold? Yeah. I put the heat on. You want me to put the heat up? Oh. Well, I put it at 70. It should warm up. He got food, Mama. Too high. God damn it. Whatever. Ah! Oh, these are bad. Black, 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 black macablins, bokoblins, whatever. That one's black. I don't like it. Ah! Go already. Shut up! Die! are you? You, get away from me! Homie. Okay, first food, then... I forgot a sword. I forgot a sword. Drop your weapon! Give me it! Gimme! Thank you! Finally! I hate those guys. They take them and the white ones. Oh, I killed those guys. Okay, good. Well, at least I got some stuff out of it. This is such a long walk. Excuse me. Black. Oh, did it just seriously break on me again? God damn it. Oh! Didn't want to. Thank you! Give me your weapon too while we're at it. He killed his own wife. Oh, wouldn't have mattered which way I face.
Well, don't keep us in suspense. How'd everything go up there on the mountain?
So you didn't feel anything? No power at all?
I'm sorry, no.
Then let's move on. You've done all you could. Feeling sorry for yourself won't be of any help. After all, it's not like your last shot was up there on Mount Lineru. Anything could finally spark the power to seal Ganon away. We just have to keep looking for that thing.
That's kind of you. Thank you.
If I may, I thought you... well, I'm not sure how to put this into words. I'm actually quite embarrassed to say it. But I was thinking about what I do when I'm healing. You know, what usually goes through my mind. It helps when I think about...
Oh, she was gonna tell her little secret and now it can't be done. Ganon.
Here.
This is it then.
Are you sure?
Positive.
It's awake. Ganon.
Let's stop wasting time. We're gonna need everything we got to take that thing down. Now, champions, to your divine beasts, show that swirling swine who's boss. Link will need to meet Ganon head-on when we attack. This needs to be a unified assault. Little guy, you get to Hyrule Castle. You can count on us for support, but it's up to you to pound Ganon into oblivion.
Come, we should go. We need to get you someplace safe.
No. I'm not a child anymore. I may not be much use on the battlefield, but there must be something I can do to help.
Oh, something happened. Okay, got that. You know what? I'm not walking. Teleport me! Beam me up, Scotty! Speaking of which, didn't I say all the VHSs that Dad have are of Star Trek? The OG? Original Star Trek, not like the Deep Space Nine or any of that? I can probably people have been saying that there's a Mandela effect, that apparently they don't say beam me up, Scotty. Maybe there was like a scene somewheres and I could find it on the VHS. I remember! I remember! Oh wait, I'm not going in the right direction. What's the AMO? Yep. Old lady!
Ah.
Da, 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 da. This is something for you that I have been keeping safe by request of Princess Zelda. This cloth was specifically made for you when you became a champion. Please handle it with care. Thank you. Okay, turn that off. These. There. Now I don't have to have that one suit on. That man is dead. Wait, there was another one. What? Let's climb around and get these things. I was trying to think of what to do. I don't have much stamina. Okay, you know what? Just so everyone else knows what I'm doing. I know where shrines are, so here's your indicator. Oh. Mushroom. I'm not ever gonna use it, but whatever. Excuse me. Where? Ooh, that's what I was gonna do. This is so weird. The TV's brightness is really bright, yet when I look at the gameplay, it's not that bright. But oh, whoops, not the E-manual. Let's do it that way. Maybe I could see things better that way. Up the mountain is what I'm trying to do. I hate these! Fucking God. I went up the wrong side. Don't jump, don't jump, don't jump. I'm so used to jumping on these things. Oh, I can make it. 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 Come on, come on, come on. Okay, there we go. Run! No, let go, let go, let go. There we go. Yeah, no. I don't know if I should. Nope, let's not attempt that. Give me your meat. Is that a goat? What is that? That's just a rock thing. Oh, it's a mushroom. I think that's what those things are called. I don't remember if those are called mushrooms or if they're... Oh, I'm about to run out of stamina. Damn it. Oh, fuck! I have another... One more. I need to make more. Yeah, I don't have enough mushrooms, so... Yep, that's a rushroom. What it's called, it's a rushroom. It's not what I need, though. Almost there, I'm there. I know chocolates aren't filling, but let me have some of the chocolates down there. Oh, I accidentally jumped. Oh, I almost fell. The wind is blowing. Up or down, that's the one thing. Up, okay. Almost there. Almost there. Almost there. This is one thing about these hills that I hate, is trying to get from one to the other. Mm-hmm. Because this is the one where you have to use one set of the thing and then go to the other set of the thing. Oh, no, I need only... need one. Yeah, you found me. Bye bye. I might do this too. Oh, Mama. I know we won't be able to see it, but... Okay, let's see if I can get this done before the thing starts. Might want to get the chairs ready. If you can reach them. I'm guessing you got the Gabe to put them back there? Gabe, put them back there. You put them back? Do that. I told you to move this chair. Oh. Move the chair and I could put them back there. Hmm. You who step foot in this shrine, offer this trial. I can never read that fast enough, just so anyone knows. And this is what this says. This shrine atop these peaks share a connection, their memory and the answer to the other's question. Commit to memory before you start. Least a failure, you will depart. So basically what it's saying is I need to remember what's in here and then depart from in here, go to the next one, try to remember what was on that one. I don't remember if I had the freaking picture, so it's about right here where I can get it. As long as I don't. There's one. I'm gonna have to use this camera instead. Oh, no, not picture. Picture, not audio. Okay. So, I got the picture for that one. Really? Every time. I didn't want this. Goodbye, hand. Where's right there? Come on, angle just right. Okay, take a snapshot of that one. And then... Oh. I almost killed myself. This one goes 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Yep. This one goes 1. Ow! Okay. This one goes up. This one goes 1, 2, 3. Same. Okay, there's another shrine underneath, so I'm gonna attempt to get that one as well. And then after the 2 shrines, I'm gonna end the stream because I want to see the Aurora Borealis. Excuse me. Already over there. I just need to travel back to it. Oh shoot. After I get a certain area, I gotta save in case I die. Here, down this. Okey-dokey. This one. Wait, yeah. Out of the way. Out of the way. Do-do-do-do. Camera angle. Bless you. I swear there was another one down underneath. Was it? I think it was just... Maybe this is the last shrine and I should disconnect. need to go to some help on you. You know, I think those three were the it. You know what? When I start the next live, maybe I should. I don't know. I'll do this shrine real quick. What did they do? Oh, one of those risky things. Okay. That's like a father figure. Oh, I didn't land hard. Okay. Now I know the distance for dropping. See, Mama, that's oh, you can't see it from right there, but you can hear the sensor, can't you? This is the one shrine I forgot in when I first got here. Because you know how usually when I usually do this, I usually do the shrines right away. You know how I was going from one thing. I didn't even bother of grabbing the shrines. I just wanted to get this stupid storyline over and done with, so I can run around. But yeah, this is the other shrine. After this shrine, I am ending live. Again, I want to catch the Aurora Borealis. I mean, if you want, Mama, you can go out now and see if it's out there. You can use the side porch or the. Just a heads up, our little sensor one in the front will keep going off. Unless we're at. Oh! Fuck! This one's gonna take a bit. Unless I do that one trick like everyone else. Flip the thing upside down. See? Now do you remember? Let's see if I... Wait. I need to get the thing, so... Angle it like that. No, I should probably do this first, then get the thing. Flatten this. Oh, and there goes. See, this is the thing, Mama. And... Whee! Oh, I think I overshot it. It went down. Ah! Midair. No! I should have waited till I hit the thing before I jumped for it. Mid-air drop me. I was almost over there too. Ooh, good bow. I got a broken one. Let me drop it. Oh no, I don't got a broken one. Nope. Go around. Wait. Put myself in the my own maze. Get down. This way. This way. Okay. Tomorrow at, I'm guessing just 5 o'clock from now on, right? For most of my streams. If I'm doing a stream. Okay. So tomorrow at 5, because I know I have D&D tomorrow. And Mother's Day stuff, so... May the goddess smile upon you. So, yeah, 5 o'clock Pacific time. I don't know what that'd be Eastern. I'll probably just share it everywhere. Or share in a lot of places. I'm used to sharing that. Have a good night. I'm gonna find a good area to save first before I do this. Let's do the by the fireplace. Okay. So yeah, thank you for watching. I will see you guys tomorrow night. Save. Good night.